The stories that will be discussed in this video occurred in 1980. Within just a few days, the bodies of two brutally murdered women were found. For many decades, one of them was known as Ventura County Jane Doe, and the other, Jane Doe of Kern County. It took nearly 40 years to imprison the perpetrator of these and other crimes, but even more time will be needed to identify the victims and provide answers to their relatives. Subscribe to this channel and don't forget to click the bell to get notifications about new videos. The city of Delano, Kern County, California. On July 15, 1980, in an almond orchard, local workers found a body. The sheriff called to the scene later described what he saw as the most brutal crime he had ever dealt with. The woman was wearing a pink top, covered in blood, blue jeans, and, as noted, very clean sneakers. Close to the victim, clear tire tracks were visible, but there were no footprints. Also, considering that the body was found just a mile from Highway 99, investigators assumed that the victim was killed elsewhere, and her body was merely disposed of in the field, thrown out of a car. The deceased was a white woman aged between 25 and 45 years, possibly of Latin American or Native American descent. There were two professionally made tattoos on her body. One depicted a flower, the word mother, and I love you. The other had a heart with the name Shirley inside it, along with I love you and Seattle. The cause of death were stab wounds. About 30 of them were located in the upper part of the torso. A toxicological examination determined that at the time of the tragedy, the woman was in a state of alcohol intoxication. Additionally, during the examination, the coroner noted the victim's missing upper teeth. There were 2 scars on the body, on the buttock and on the abdomen. Besides this, surgical screws, plates, and a metal rod in her left leg were found. However, there were no numbers on them. Although the fingerprints taken did not assist the investigation, the victim's belongings, as well as particles of the likely perpetrator's skin, were preserved for subsequent examinations. Likewise, biological material from a Michelob beer bottle found near the victim was also preserved. In the early stages of the investigation, detectives received a lot of different information regarding the identity of the murdered woman. Some of those questioned speculated that the girl could have been a worker at a local apple orchard. One woman told police that a bar waitress named Rebecca Ochoa had the same tattoos, but checking these versions led nowhere. Attempts were made to identify the victim by showing her tattoos to masters working in the area. In one of the salons in Bakersfield, a tattoo artist recognized the technique and sent the investigators to a tattoo salon in Los Angeles, where the large Native American community was located. But the only thing the police found out there was that the victim was most likely originally from Seattle, Washington. Thus, despite the informative tattoos and other unusual features, the detectives were unable to identify the victim at that time, and she began to be called Kern County Jane Doe. Just 3 days later, another body was found 150 miles from the location of this murder. Westlake, Ventura County, California, July 18, 1980. A body was found at the edge of a local high school's parking lot. When the police arrived at the scene, they saw the body of a partially undressed young woman, who was initially mistaken as a mannequin. She was wearing a white blouse, white underwear, black bra, and red corduroy pants. Based on the appearance of the crime scene, law enforcement officers immediately assumed that the murder had taken place elsewhere and that the victim had been brought to the parking lot to dispose of the body. The drag marks on the body also indicated this. The victim's age was estimated to be between 15 and 30 years old. Physically, she resembled Native Americans and possibly also had Latin American roots. A key feature was that the victim had her eyebrows shaved off, and the artificial brows were a 1/4 inch above the natural location. Also, at the time of her death, she was 5 months pregnant, expecting a boy. It was determined that the woman had given birth before. In addition, during the autopsy, traces of a gynecological surgery were found, which is usually performed after repeated births. It is quite likely that she could have had several children. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds, approximately 29 in number. There were also signs of strangulation and a large number of so-called defensive wounds, indicating that the girl had fiercely resisted before her death. Scrapings from under her nails with the biological material of the attacker were collected and preserved by forensic experts. All efforts by detectives in the 80s neither led to the solving of this crime nor to the identification of the victim. Then the deceased was given the name Ventura County Jane Doe. Only 32 years later, in 2012, due to DNA analysis of skin particles from under the victim's nails, it was discovered that the killer of the two women, found 3 days apart, was the same person. Wilson Chouest Jr. was born in 1951 in New Orleans, Louisiana. The first known crimes he committed were in 1977 at the age of 25. At that time, he offered to drive a girl to Topanga Canyon. Planning the abduction, the man had removed the interior door handles in advance so that the victim couldn't escape from the car. Having driven the unfortunate woman to a deserted location, he robbed her, raped her, choked her, and beat her until she lost consciousness. The victim recovered from her injuries, gave testimony, and Chouest was sent to prison. However, in exchange for pleading guilty to robbery and kidnapping, he was not charged with rape. Therefore, Wilson only spent a few years behind bars. Just a month after being released, he continued his attacks. In Visalia, California, Chouest approached a woman who was walking from College of the Sequoias and tried to force her into his car, threatening her with a knife. Instead, the woman handed him her wallet, and seeing two passers-by, ran towards them. But the robber was left with the wallet, which contained not only money, but also her home phone number. The next day, a stranger called her and offered to return the money. He stalked another woman near the campus of the same college. This time, the criminal succeeded in his intent, and, having driven the unfortunate woman to a cornfield, he raped her. However, when she started talking about her husband, he drove her back and apologized. On July 14, 1980, in a bar called Ruby, in the town of Lemoore, Kings County, California, Chouest met a young woman whom he raped and killed. He disposed of the body in an almond orchard in the town of Delano, an hour's drive from the abduction site. This murder victim was Kern County Jane Doe. 3 days later in Visalia, he picked up a hitchhiking woman whom he also raped and killed, disposing of her body in Westlake. She was Ventura County Jane Doe. While Chouest was not yet convicted, he refused to give any statements. However, as part of the investigation into these murders, investigators reached Patrick Scott Bell, one of the brothers who washed Chouest's car of blood. As it turned out, the criminal told about the murder of a woman, but Patrick not only did not report this to the police, on the contrary, he helped get rid of the evidence of the crime and lied to his mother, Caroline, who was asking where the blood in this car came from, saying that his acquaintance had hit a deer and drove it away from the accident scene. The public defender representing Chouest in court, Andrei Ninchev, insisted on his client's innocence, saying that he had engaged in sexual contact with the victims by mutual consent, and therefore his DNA was found under their nails. But this didn't help. In 2018, the murderer was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison, plus an additional 4 years. It was only impossible to convict him of killing the unborn son of the so-called Jane Doe of Ventura County, because the laws of the 1980s, when the crime was committed, did not provide for this. Despite the fact that the murderer was caught and convicted, the identities of his victims had not been established at that time. Only in 2018, thanks to the efforts of the DNA Doe Project team, a modern DNA profile was created for the unidentified woman from Ventura County and her unborn child. Their data was uploaded into genealogical databases, where numerous relatives were found in different countries. A third cousin was even found, but he did not know this woman. Moreover, the biological father of her child was identified, but he also could not help in any way. Modern DNA analysis showed that 60% of the girl's ancestors belonged to the Native Americans, and several generations ago, one of her ancestors was from England or Ireland. As a result, a large list of surnames and regions of residence of the girl's relatives was compiled and published in the hope that someone will recognize her. The situation was different with the other victim, the unidentified woman from Kern County. In 2020, a woman named Violet Soosay thought she recognized her aunt, whom she had not seen since 1977, in the facial reconstruction on the DNA Doe Project website. To dispel all doubts, she uploaded her DNA analysis result into the GED match database system, and her assumptions were confirmed. The victim turned out to be Shirley Soosay. She was born and raised in the Samson Cree Reservation in Alberta, Canada. When she was 14 years old, her father passed away, which led to financial difficulties, and the girl decided to leave the reservation in search of work. She eventually settled in Vancouver, British Columbia. There she got married and had 2 children, but then the marriage fell apart, the children were given to a foster family, and Shirley herself became homeless with drug and alcohol addiction. She periodically came to the reservation to see her relatives. At her brother's funeral in 1977, she said that she did not plan to stay in Alberta, but would go visit a friend in Seattle. Over the next 3 years, Shirley lived in this city and sent letters to her family, which stopped in 1980. At the time of her death, she was 35 years old. Shirley Soosay turned out to be one of the first members of the U.S. indigenous people identified through forensic genealogy. What do you think? Did Chouest commit other murders besides these 2? Or did he stop for some reason in 1980?